And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Rack Show. I'm one of your hosts, Frank Horvath. Joined with me in studio is your other host, Mr. Tim Kelly of Apache Solutions. Tim, how are you doing today?
Wonderful, man. How are you?
I am fantastic. It has been a wonderful week. Things have been rocking and rolling along. We've been doing quite a bit of work getting things moving. Added some fun things up at Apache as far as some technical IT type things. So that's been fun. But been rocking and rolling pretty good.
Awesome.
So we have a fun show for our listening audience today. We are talking about instructors.
Oh, fun.
We're all things instructors. So what does what to look for in a quality instructor? Good instructors. What's that look like? Bad instructor. What's that look like? Because unfortunately, they're out there.
Right.
And so let's kick it off. I'm going to kick it over to you first. So okay. Tim, what would you look for in a quality instructor?
Well, if we're talking about firearms instructors in general, a quality instructor should have a handful of different traits. Maybe some prior experience as a teacher of some sort, as a leader of some sort. And I'll always, check for some type of rating or certification from, a recognized organization that generally goes a long way. And someone that's actually passionate about it.
Right.
I think that really goes a long way. If you're passionate, that means you understand. If you're passionate about this as an instructor, that means that you are a forever student.
Right.
So it means if you if you ask your instructor when the last time they took a class was, and they say 10 years ago or back when I was in the Marine Corps,
right.
Probably not you're gonna be lacking some quality there.
Yeah, and something else. When you find an instructor who's passionate about something, passion can go two different directions.
Right.
You can have they're super passionate about it and they're way off base, or they're super passionate about something and like they're keeping up with things, keeping up with study, keeping up with whatever topic that they're teaching. In our particular case, talk about firearms instruction. The things that I look for in that quality instructor, much like what you said, I'm looking for that forever student. I'm looking for somebody who is, actively growing, actively learning. Hey, I'm looking for somebody who's willing to admit, that they don't know the answer to the question.
Yeah.
So something that I really enjoy doing or you're participating in is, if a student asks a question, I'm not going to, lie to them and say, oh, well, this is what the answer to this question is. I'm going to look at them in the eye and say, you know what? I do not know.
Yeah.
I'm going to find out. I'm going to, figure out, whatever the answer to your question is, and I'm going to learn myself. But that's an opportunity for me to grow.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions to get is the ones that I can't answer.
Yeah.
Because it forces me to go out and educate myself on the subject and be able to articulate it better.
Right.
And
right.
I agree with you. I think that's an excellent quality of an instructor. I mean, and to your point, some folks view this as I've been trained,
right?
Where there's an ed attached to the end of it.
There's finality,
right? And this isn't finite like that. Like you don't just go get certified and say ominous dominus, to quote. I won't misquote him, but I also won't include some certain words in this for the sake of the show. But to quote one of our great mentors, Tom Givens, you're messing with people's lives here.
Right.
Like when you're talking about a firearms trainer for self-defense, you're messing with people's lives here. You really need to take this seriously. And speaking of Tom Givens, I mean, he's 70-something years old. Mm-hmm. He still makes a point to get at least one class where he goes and learns.
As a student.
Yeah,
as an absolute student. Right.
Yeah. And not to mention all the classes that he teaches across the country and all the books he reads, all the articles he reads, and the stuff that he learns, just in from his colleagues and from, from us.
Right. And to make a point of that also, so I mean, that's a fantastic example of a good instructor, right? Mm-hmm. is regularly updating himself. He's updating his community. He's letting people know. Now, shameless plug there. Like, I'm a member of his Patreon page, and he's constantly sending out just fantastic information. Maybe not necessarily stuff that he's written himself, but of other instructors, other just people, other authorities that are in the industry that have something to say about a particular topic. And so it's just it's a wealth of information. He had posted one not long ago talking about different like the ballistic effects of certain cartridges, of home defense cartridges. Fantastic read.
Yeah.
He's posted some articles, well, actually by you, Tim.
Yeah.
But one of our other guys, Dan Brady. So there's just a great wealth of information that he's taking in, but he's also pushing back out.
Sure.
That leads me to the next one. So what is our favorite topic? What is an example of a poor instructor? For me, like, it's somebody who is not safe. We hear horror stories, things like that all over the place. But if just because somebody says that they're instructor doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. There has to be some weight. There has to be some proof behind that.
It's easy. That's easy. That's easy to find, in my opinion. I think it is much easier to run across the instructor who doesn't have, it's easily identifiable that they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge, and they're just flying by the seat of their pants.
Yeah.
Most people, even if they don't have a deep level of education in this subject, most people can identify when somebody's just, kind of
blowing smoke.
Blowing smoke through the whole thing, right? It's the ones who actually do know what they're talking about,
right?
Who are very good at it, but they are unsafe in the way they present the content.
Right.
Those are the ones that are hard, because I'm guilty of it myself. I've found myself working with an instructor who inspires me, and I learn a great deal of information from, all to find that this instructor goes off and does something completely careless,
right,
and puts his students in danger. And it's like, man,
right.
that's a difficult one. That's a difficult one to navigate.
It really is, but the crux of that is, speaking up and saying something,
Sure.
If you're there, if you're participating, whatever it may be.
Right.
And also on the other side of that is, just don't take somebody who says that they're instructor for face granted. People can have lapses of judgment, right? Things
Sure.
happen.
Absolutely.
And because of that, you need to stay on your toes. Let's say that you're in a class or you're taking a private session or something like that with an instructor, and something doesn't feel right, look right, taste right, smell right. Stop and say something.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you know what? I'm done. I know that you're at this particular moment, a point of authority, but I'm not letting that get in the way of my life, my safety, my ability to have a wholesome life.
Yeah.
Something else that I'd see a lot, especially, we'll say there's some big name instructors, people fall into like dogma. They're like, you know what, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm going to live by everything that, this guy is saying that's coming out of this dude's mouth. But they don't stop and analyze it or think about it for themselves.
Yeah.
I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, we call that drinking the Kool-Aid, and that's found in any community, man.
Yeah.
It's not just a firearms training community. You can find that anywhere you go, where folks essentially are they're just taking in everything as, this is the word, this is the way it goes, this is how it's supposed to be 100% of the time, and that's an easy one to fall into.
Yeah. Yeah, something that I would push our listeners to say is vet your instructors. That's the biggest piece. You should be able to sit down and say, hey, what are your credentials? Why are you teaching what you're teaching, and how did you come to this conclusion? Like, have that honest conversation with them.
Right.
If the instructor founders or they start talking about some other experience, then there's something else there. We'll be right back after the break.
and welcome back to the Rack Show, where we talk about everything regarding the responsibly armed citizen. My name is Tim Kelly. Here with me, I have Frank Horvath, and we've been talking about what quality firearms instructors look like. And we've kind of gone over a few different things, what a good instructor looks like, what a bad instructor looks like, that type of thing. The next thing we want to talk about is, what about a law enforcement or military background? How much weight does that carry in the civilian firearms training community?
So this is something that we see in an industry often. Full disclosure: I am not law enforcement. I am not military. I am average Joe civilian here. I seek training, right? I'm one of those forever students. I'm constantly going out. I'm constantly getting more education. But because of that, I've run into a lot of these guys who just solely rest on the laurels of, I was in the military. I happen to be a cook, but so because I was a cook, I'm also a firearms expert. Right. But that kind of mentality is super dangerous. Now, I don't want to discredit, right? So there are plenty of law enforcement military who use their background and their training to be able to help other citizens, learn certain things. I don't necessarily agree that all of the tactics and things like that is taught, and all of the ways that certain firearms are manipulated should be taught, on the civilian side. There's not a place for it. But as far as maybe some of that background, sure, I'll admit to that. But Tim, you're a Marine, right? Mm-hmm. You are a Marine. Yes. So I think you could, better provide examples. So let me turn that back on you. Okay. With your background as a Marine, how did that help you becoming a firearms instructor, to help teach people today about self-defense firearms instruction?
I could literally talk about this topic for an entire show. Like, this goes pretty deep with me. I'll try. Where do I start? I think I had that type of, I know I had that type of mentality when I first got out of the military, before I recognized what the training community looks like in the civilian world, before I had any idea that even existed. I had it in my mind that I was in the Marine Corps. I had it figured out. I'm a combat veteran at that. Like, I wasn't a cook in the Marine Corps, right? I went out there, did what I had to do, and I come back, and yeah, of course I know how to sling a gun around. But it's a completely different world. A completely different world. You're talking about conventional warfare, right? Somebody who has experience in conventional warfare versus a average Joe, a father of 2 kids, a husband, a guy that goes out and pushes a 9 to 5. That's night and day. Right. That is night and day. So my qualifications and my experience from the Marine Corps only amount to a small piece of what Apache is today, right? A small piece. And I would say my leadership experience, and maybe a small fraction of combat experience has helped out with this, but really not a lot. It doesn't mean that it doesn't give me the automatic right to just teach civilians how to protect themselves, because it's completely different. All right. One of the things that I'm constantly talking to veterans about this type of thing, and I see them every single time. They'll come by at a conference, they'll come by at when we're having at a festival or something like that, and you'll get the dude who's like, I went ahead, I got my concealed carry, but just so you know, I was in the Army. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, man. He's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I can protect myself. Okay, that's where you're wrong. Like, and that's a hard pill for people like us to swallow, right? When you're out there being Mr. Awesome, and you come back and you still feel like Mr. Awesome, it's naive to believe that that is going to easily transfer over to the civilian world. It doesn't work. It just doesn't compute, period. I mean, you think about it. I was only that awesome because I had 14 other awesome dudes with me.
Right.
With body armor.
Yep.
And machine guns. And I had literally a death on the other end of the line of my comms on my gear. I could order destruction anywhere I wanted it if I felt like my life was threatened. If I got hurt or injured, someone was going to come and help me.
Right.
If I got pinned down somewhere, I had backup. We had QRF, a quick reactionary force. You had all kinds of support. You don't have any of that as a civilian.
Right.
None of that. If you're a veteran listening to this show right now, I want you to swallow that pill. Swallow that pill and really think hard about that. Think about all the assets that you had in the military that you no longer have today. It doesn't just, you're not Rambo. It does not just transition over, to the civilian world. If that were the case, we wouldn't be struggling as civilians, veteran civilians. We wouldn't be struggling right now. If you swallow that pill, I'm telling you, there's a brighter light at the end of the tunnel. But that is, it certainly doesn't qualify you to be an instructor to try to get around to your point.
Right. Man, there's a lot to unpack there. a lot to unpack. We're definitely gonna touch base on that. There's gonna be a whole show devoted to that, 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much information there. And again, I don't have a frame of reference aside from just having friends, and I've seen firsthand that that mentality of, okay, yeah, man, I was in the military, I have it, I'm covered and everything, and just to have something happen and have their entire world fall apart around them.
Right.
Like you said, they don't have backup, right? You don't have a team of guys. It's literally you and your family,
right?
Or and whatever training, whatever interests that your spouse may have or not. That's the struggle. So if it is you using the tools that you legally can have here with, on your person, whatever it may be today, what are you going to be able to do? How often do you personally train? At what level of proficiency are you at? That's the other thing that, again, as a concealed carry instructor, now we run into often is, somebody will say, oh, well, I need to get my concealed carry, but I was a veteran, I'm squared away. I'm like, okay, man, cool. That's good to hear you. The class is focused on laws governing deadly force anyway. It has nothing to do with shooting. It's just, shooting is a check in a box.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, not every time, but often when these people who have that type of attitude, we'll say, come to that class specifically, they do absolute excellent in the class. They participate in everything, but it came down time to shoot the state mandated minimum qualification. It didn't do so well. Yeah. And that's that pill that you were talking about. They haven't swallowed that pill yet. They're still thinking that they're awesome because maybe at one time they were.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But just like training, there will be some degradation of skill over time.
Sure.
And so if you don't actively train, if you don't actively participate, if you're not actively picking up your firearm and going to a range or something like that, and putting some rounds down range or even dry firing, then there's going to be a little bit of degradation of skill. You're not going to lose it, but it's it's not going to be the same.
Now you've taken like civilian rated classes, like a concealed carry class, maybe an NRA class or something like that. You've taken classes from prior military or prior law enforcement, haven't you?
Yep.
Have you had both good and bad experiences with that?
Absolutely. So as far as the bad experience, what it ends up being is these instructors would have it's like storytelling time. Like everything relates back to what happened 20, 30 years ago, whatever it may be. And same, not just military, but also law enforcement. Like, when I was on the force, and it was just, the whole time was spent, telling stories. That is frustrating. So as a paying student, I'm like, okay, man, I respect, what you went through. And I respect, your efforts, but I'm trying to create my own here. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to, grow. Now, on the other side of that, I've had some fantastic military, either prior or current military and law enforcement instructors that have taught just phenomenal content. And it's because they were real grounded. They understood that there's a difference between the civilian realm of self-defense and law enforcement military, and they kept the content relevant. Phil Groth, Vigor Training, right? He's current law enforcement,
He's still
law enforcement. But he's just a huge wealth of information. He can break that divide down and say, hey, in a law enforcement context, this is what would apply, but on a civilian context, doesn't apply to you. It doesn't matter. This is real world. And on top of that, he can give you real world metrics and real world data of showing, well, this is what happens. We see this 70% of the time, and this is the outcome. 70% of the time, whatever it may be. I'm just fantastic instructor. But there are many other instructors that are just like that. Somebody in law enforcement teaching concealed carry class, I really don't have an issue with that.
Right.
Generally speaking, it's somebody who has studied the law, at least have been taught how to research the law, and generally speaking, now again, I don't want to say always, but generally speaking, they understand what's happening and when.
All phones on silent, please.
No, my bad. But yeah, generally speaking, they know exactly what's happening and when, and it's not a non-event.
Right.
So and anywho, so yeah, that was my bad.
That's all right.
My bad, listening audience.
That's all right. Well, I will just say that before we go to break, this is not something for our listeners here. If you're going out and trying to find a good firearms instructor, don't base your reasoning for taking their class because they were prior law enforcement or because they were prior military.
Right.
But certainly don't hold it against them either. Okay, it's not the only thing that's going to qualify a person to teach whatever it is that you're teaching. Now, another good way to look at it is what's their profession, right? If they were prior infantry or something like that, and you're trying to learn some infantry tactics, hey man, go learn from him. But they shouldn't, if that's all the training they have, they shouldn't be teaching some basic pistol class or something like that.
Yeah, and then again, I lean on, what's the real world civilian context of that?
Sure.
If it's just for entertainment, go do it. But if it's for save your life, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe do something for else. We'll be right back. And we are back. You're listening to The Rack Show, the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, where we give you all the things a responsibly armed citizen should know. So we've been talking about today instructors, right? We were talking about what quality instructors look like, what good instructors, bad instructors, etc. We talked a little bit about law enforcement, military background. Tim, we talked a little bit about your background in military as a Marine. So I'm going to kick it back over to you. Tell me a little bit about your firearms instructor journey. So, as I'm sure our listeners already know, Tim he's the owner of Apache Solutions in Yadkinville, North Carolina. He's really the head guy at Apache, right? He helps with maintains literally everything. But you weren't this, gunslinging, awesome, baddie right out of the military. So how did that evolve? How did that change? How did Tim become the Tim of today?
Well, it depends on your metric. Okay, I was pretty awesome. I was a 4th award expert on rifle and a 3rd award expert on pistol, and according to Marine Corps standards. It does not mean I was any match for anyone at the TACCON shoot-off.
Right.
But I didn't understand that. I didn't have that metric then. All right, so I guess my journey started, excuse me, my journey started when I got out of the Marine Corps trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. I ended up in college, earned my degree in mechanical engineering, set out on a journey to learn how to design and manufacture firearms and firearms components, did that for a short period of time. And I seen a pretty significant hole in the community, in the gun community, for firearms training. I mean, it seems like anywhere you go for firearms training, it's either a state mandated class that you need to take. So it's dogma, right? Or it's another class that's essentially it's watered down, and it's not really it's institutional type stuff, and again, dogma. Right. There's very little places where someone could go and actually grow. And I say the closest thing to that would just be like your average gun range. But when you go to the average gun range, you don't get an instructor.
Right.
You get a bay, a gun, some ammo, a target, and you just poke holes in the paper.
Right.
Every once in a while, somebody might come over and say, hey, don't flag people, or hey, you're jerking the trigger, or something like that. So you might get some, like, a little instruction here and there, but nothing really that existed to really help people. And again, as I said before, there's no real metric for armed citizens.
Right.
So with all of these problems that I was seeing, I had to try to come up with some solutions. So I said, well, if I can't find it, might as well fix it. So we started Apache Solutions. And Apache is designed much like a gym with a private trainer. So students come out for one-on-one sessions for an hour, maybe 2-hour block of instruction. We meet that student where they are, and we help them grow wherever they're at in their firearms training journey. Doesn't matter if they're a beginner, if they've been shooting their whole life, right? So I didn't just open up the business and start doing that with, Marine Corps and college under my background. I knew pretty quickly that I needed to branch out and get more education in the civilian world. And so I think my first real, I took several NRA classes, worked my way up to be an instructor through the NRA, that type of thing. But my first real experience that led me to this calling was a handgun combatives course with Dave Spalding up in Pennsylvania. I went with a good friend of ours. And that's where I woke up and said, oh man, like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what my community needs.
Yep.
And so at that class, one thing I'll never forget is Dave had a print off of metrics. And I was like, oh man, there they are. There they are. That's the standard, right? And these standards are tight. They're pretty tight. And I said, this is what we need to master.
Yep.
And if we're going to teach this type of thing, this is what we need to study. This is what we need to master. So handgun combatives classes galore, man. That's what I took.
Yep.
Right. Now, I didn't just stop there. I kept venturing out and taking other classes too, and I still continue to do so.
I remember as a student of Tim's many years ago. Well, I went on to say many years ago, but several years ago, I remember literally the week after Tim and the other friend of ours came back from that class, right, the Hang Combatives class. Man, you guys were on fire.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
there was a night and day difference between, literally the week prior to the very next week. There was, all these changes and, different ideas, and we had those metrics, and, there was a measurable standard now. That was established of what our goals or what we're working towards, and what we needed to, work towards mastering. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that vividly.
And I think, I think over the years, as we've continued to grow, we've had the luxury, because we are structured so much differently than everybody else. We've had the luxury of using our private sessions as kind of like our laboratory. Mm-hmm. So we've developed a lot of our curriculum through what works and what doesn't work with private students.
Right.
So all of our classes have been built around what happens in private sessions.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that makes us really special. The other thing is I'm not the only one doing this.
Right.
And I mean, we were just talking about this earlier, like we've reached a completely different point in this career, right? In this business. I don't have a big role in teaching private sessions anymore. We have instructors that have come up and do it really, really well.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something that's really interesting, kind of about the dynamic of Apache is, there's so many different people with so many different backgrounds, right? We're all not clones of Tim.
Right.
So, for example,
yeah,
right. So, for example, my background in coming up, with my instructor journey is completely different, polar opposite. Mine stemmed from I wanted to learn more about, self-defense in general. So I was chasing all of these different experiences. I was going to all these different classes and things like that of other instructors who are around the, Iredell County, Mecklenburg area. And they were just that. They were experiences. I really wasn't, it was about, I was learning how to be a cool guy, how to look cool on, running a gun, but I really wasn't learning the nuts and bolts of what it meant for self-defense. Mm. I happened to stop in a gun shop one day, and I met this long-bearded hippie fella who invited me to come out to a class, Tim, and not a class, a private session. Yeah. And I rolled out to this, dirt hole, and we shot into a dirt berm, and I looked like an absolute fool. But that was my first real taste of what actual, private one-on-one training was. Mm. And that was with you and another instructor at the time. And that caught on like fire. So I think you and the other instructor had a bet that I wasn't going to show up. I would just come back again. Yeah. But I did. And then like a bad rash, I just kept showing up again and again and again and again. And then I very distinctly remember at some point, and this, I joined on Apache. It probably wasn't even 6 months after Apache was officially open there. It was really early on. And I remember at some point, you and this other instructor said, "Hey, you're doing a lot that's up here. You should really consider coming out and teaching yourself." And I was like, "Nah, I'm good. Not my thing. I appreciate it. Thanks for that, but that's just not me." And then some time went by. My church had this thing. It was Bible Bullets and Barbecue. So it was just a men's fellowship event where we all just got together and ate good food and, did some stuff in the Bible. And we had a little range that was set up. So we were down there shooting at the range. And the range portion stressed me so bad. Like, it wasn't organized well. It was just, everybody and their brother was just bringing stuff out and just, shooting into, it was a nice, safe backstop, but still, like, it was just
no emergency procedures,
nothing.
No med kits.
So I went on like mini Tim mode and I was like, all right, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. Like, I took control of that entire event. I literally spent the entire time teaching other people how to use their firearms. And these are guns that I've never seen, I've never touched before, but like I was coaching these people on what to do. And then, again, my fellow church members. And something about that just was like a light bulb for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, all right, fine, I'm in. And I remember coming back to you guys. They're like, all right, fine, I'm not going to teach yet, but let me shadow, let me watch. So every chance I could to get on the range and shadow and watch and observe. Eventually, I got comfortable enough to, start branching out and doing some things. And then I took a break away from you guys, from Apache for, gosh, it was probably 6, 8 months, almost a year. It was a while. And I ventured out to a bunch of other places. That's where I first got caught wind of range masters, when I first caught wind of some other instructors. And I came back and I realized, Apache was something very special. There was something, very, very, very special here. And I wanted more. So I started taking a more active role in teaching, instructing, and doing things. And that was, several years ago. And now since then, I've taken a number of other classes. I now have my latest achievement is Rangemaster Master certification through Rangemaster. So I've gone through all of his classes except for the one that he just announced. His, what was it? Professional pistol pistol instructor, which I think you guys are.
Me and Zach.
You and Zach are going to take that here very soon. And so it's never ending, right? There's always something. Have multiple. I think almost all NRA certifications, less just a handful. And again, I'm passionate about it. I love it. I went after the North Carolina concealed carry instructor, not just so I could hand out certificates, because you're not making any money doing this, but it's because I was passionate about it. Right. Yeah. So I had another instructor friend of ours who was very passionate about the law, and that was addictive. He went through and explained to me why he was so passionate about it, and like a wildfire, that caught on to me. I was like, yeah, I can see that, man. I'm 100% bought in. Yeah. I said all that to say everyone is different.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's the cool thing about, the instructors we have at Apache is literally everybody up there has a different background. They've all approached it a different way.
Right.
My story is not the same as Tim's, it isn't the same as Zach's. And, it's.
And we grow from hanging with each other and learning from each other.
Right.
Some of the get-togethers that we have, man, are some of the think tanks for some of our greatest creations,
Yep.
And that's a unique thing. It is really special. But I will tell you that our journeys aren't really all that special or unique. Most quality firearms instructors have very, very similar journeys as instructors, right? Less trained and more training.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Training. I mean, if you talk to, one, firearms instructor or another, it's always about training. What's the next thing you're going to do? What's the last thing you did? I mean, there's some great information and great wealth of knowledge out there. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. My name is Tim Kelly. With me I have Frank Horvath, and we have been talking about firearms trainers, what they are, how to find good quality instructors, how to recognize a bad one. We've gone over how much weight law enforcement or military backgrounds carry in the civilian firearms training sector. We've talked about my firearms training or instructor journey, Frank's instructor journey. We've talked about all kinds of different interesting stuff. So if you're just now listening, make sure to pick the show back up from the beginning. It's been a very interesting conversation between me and Frank, and we've certainly had a lot of fun. So we are going to roll into the competency of the month. So first, let me explain what competency of the month is. So our competency of the month started off as a way for us as a cadre inside of Apache Solutions to challenge one another, challenge each other's knowledge base, challenge each other's experience levels and that type of thing, and encourage you to go out and study and learn a little bit more. So every month we release what we call the competency of the month, and it's a topic to discuss, and that our cadre have an opportunity to write an article, do a report or something like that, or submit a video and do a presentation on the topic. And honestly, it's been a lot of fun. So we decided to open it up to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show and share it with the community. And myself and Frank are just going to talk about the subject at hand. Now, this month's competency is a little more in Frank's realm of expertise. He kind of lives and loves this stuff. So we're going to be talking about the functions of a cartridge or shell and the phases of ballistics. And I think the concentration today is going to be on reloading.
Yeah, buddy.
That's your show. That's your
Reloading.
show. I'll have to start with this. So I started reloading, I don't know, has it been
quite a few years ago,
I guess 4 or 5 years ago. And I still can't do it now, like by myself without Frank there holding my hand. Like there's goodness. Hey man, come set this up for me. It's almost like it's almost like I need him to be my training wheels on a bicycle. Like it's awful. It's complicated for somebody like me, especially what's surprising about it is I have an engineering degree. Like I should be able to figure this stuff out, but I get so wrapped up around, all the ins and outs of reloading. Yeah. So can you first start off, tell me what a basic first time reloader, first time to reloading, what do they need and what can they put on a side burner and learn about later?
So it's very easy when you're first getting into reloading to want all the things, right? Because there's a lot of just like any new hobby, like there's shiny things that, I have to have this and this and this and that and, all these other kind of things. You need to start off, right? I'm talking bare bones. You need a single stage press, just like a rock chuck or something like that. Just something that, it's a single die doing a single function. You're doing a single job at a time. You need a full set of dies for whatever cartridge you decide to reload on. You need to have a reference material of some sort. So like a ballistics book that breaks down the powders and the different bullet weights and the overall length of the cartridge, and that really breaks down what you're going to be doing to your cartridge when you're reloading. You must have a solid reference material. There's a lot of information that's online, but I would steer clear of that, at least at first, because just like anything else online, there's a lot of junk on there also. Especially when you're reloading, you need to be especially careful with the information that you're using, because what works for somebody may not necessarily work for you, and if it doesn't work for you, it could potentially be hazardous. Sure. If something happens, you're loading a cartridge wrong or something like that. If the firearm that you're putting in and can't handle those pressures, then we can be calling you nubs the rest of your life. But anyway, so a reference material. You need to have a scale, and then that's for measuring out like your different weights for your powder and things of that nature, and maybe even verifying your projectile weights. Again, that's something that I like verifying. And then that's pretty much it. You can get away with. There's some manual, things that you can do to get away from that. Oh, I'm sorry, gauges. I'm sorry, gauges and calipers. You want go, no go gauges. You want a set of calipers. Everything else are going to be just add-ons. There's things that are going to help make things safer, right? So you're going to want like a blast-proof cabinet to keep your powder in, things of that nature. You want to have, make sure that there are no open flames around your reloading bench, so no candles, no smelly things, whatever it may be. You want to stay away from your furnace if any source of ignition. But there's a lot of extra stuff that we get sold on the reloading as a reloader on the reloading side that you really don't need, right? Until you you're grounded in how to reload and the functions of doing that, how to reload a cartridge, and even those single stage presses, I love running a single stage presses for precision rifle ammunition. There's a feel to it. You can feel each and every cartridge. You can that cartridge is absolutely perfect. And if you're using once fired brass out of whatever the specific rifle that you're reloading for, then you can feel literally everything. Like everything is identical. Everything is perfect. Like the weights are identical. If you're using a quality powder measure. A way of distributing the powder out onto the scale, then you can go through and say, okay, well, this is exactly the grain weight that I need for this particular load, for this particular rifle, whatever it is. But then, as all things, you can get sucked into a hobby, which I did. And I went from a single stage press to a progressive, which just means all the dies are on the die on the plate on the press at once, and you can just swap the press around to move the dies around. You're still running the handle.
Right. So let me stop you there.
Yeah.
For our listeners' sake, when you're talking about dies, these dies all perform a different job.
Yes.
Right. So how many dies does it take to reload just one cartridge? Let's say we'll use the AR-15's 223 or 5.56 cartridge. Yep. How many dies does it take?
You're going to want at least a minimum of 3 dies. 4 is probably going to be closer to what you're going to be end up using. And again, every die has a particular job. So you'll have a die that is popping out the used primer if you're using once fired brass or something like that. And then at the same time it's popping out the primer, it's also starting that resizing process for the rifle. You have another one who is another die that is bringing you down a little bit closer to that final dimension size for the actual brass. Then you have another one that is seating the bullet, the actual projectile itself, inside of your cartridge, and then you have often you'll have another die that after it's seated, it'll crimp the top of the brass to the actual projectile. Now, again, it depends. It depends on for like a rifle, you're going to use a little bit different set of dies. There's a little bit different processes that go along with that, because often with a rifle, when you're resizing, when you're bringing all this material back in, you're elongating the cartridge. So because of that, you have to trim the cartridge back a little bit and adjust that.
Sure.
You don't have that. It's still there, but it's not as bad. You can get away with not worrying about it with pistol cartridges. So for pistol cartridges, again, you still have those three odd, 4, sometimes 4 or 5 dies, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But you don't have to be as concerned with you still have to be concerned with the overall length and make sure it fits in the gauge. But you don't have to be as concerned with how long that brass is when you're seating everything together and getting everything in place. So. Again, but the books that I was talking about, that reference material I was telling you about before, that's going to help lay everything out. It's going to say this is how long your brass needs to be. This is what the overall length's supposed to be. This is what your shoulder height's supposed to be. It breaks everything down. Just taking it slow. Go step by step. Find yourself an Elmer. Find yourself another Frank that can help guide you through the process of either setting up the press or going step by step of what you want to do and how you want to do it. the very first thing before after you've picked up that single stage presses, you need to say, okay, well, what cartridge am I going to reload on? And then buy a die set specific to that cartridge. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need carbide dies or anything like that. Just buy some old, steel dies. Give them a little bit of love, and then just experiment, learn. Figure things out. I would be very cautious about actually cycling the first few cartridges that you make, because you need to learn the process. But after you get comfortable with that, after you feel solid that what you've produced matches what's in that reference material, and then after you get some experience with actually cycling that, making sure it works, and you have your process down, then rock on. I mean, just that's really where it goes.
It sounds like you should be teaching a class on this. I mean, because I'm intrigued. I would really like. See, my brain works a little bit differently. I tend to get really impatient with this type of thing.
Yep.
Right. What I see is a lack of efficiency when I see the single stage. You see an ability to perfect and make. And you see consistency with that.
Yep.
I see inefficiency.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, but one pull of the handle only does one task. Whereas with this press over here that's got all these other doohickeys on it, one pull of the handle does a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's to me that's been my problem. So if we could get a way to break this down into processes, and you could explain, this is the process we're working on. We're working on the stage and priming stage all in this one sitting. And then we're going to come back, replace the die, put it up another one, and do another process. I think I'd be more apt to do something like that. So I need your class.
Yep. So the class is coming. Okay. So me and another buddy of ours, Rodney White, we've actually gone through and we have the class ready to go. We haven't presented it yet. The equipment's a little expensive. We're working on towards that, but here very soon, I'm sure we're going to be doing something at Apache. We'll maybe have a bunch of rock chuckers in class, clamped to tables or something like that. But yeah, we'll definitely get together. I just love it. I mean, there's just so much information there. It's just, I mean, I could talk an entire show literally about reloading, but it's so much fun. But regardless, I think that's all the time we have for today. We've had a great show. Tim, thank you, and
Thanks,
we'll see you guys next week.